In September of 1955, a silver Porsche folded itself around a road sign in California, and the man inside it became a legend within hours. What took a little longer, about 5 years, give or take a mechanic's legs, was the car becoming something else entirely. I'm Percy Winslow, and I want to be clear before we start. I don't believe cars have souls. Ask me again at the end of this video. James Dean bought the Porsche 550 Spyder in the last weeks of his life and nicknamed it Little Bastard, painted right there on the back. Half joke, half prophecy. On September 30th, 1955, driving it to a race in Salinas, he collided with another vehicle at a highway junction. He died almost instantly. The car, what was left of it, did not die with him. That's usually where these stories end. This one was just getting started. The wreck was bought by a customizer named George Barris, a man who knew a marketable tragedy when he saw one. He intended to strip it for parts and put pieces on display, a fairly cold business decision that history seems to have taken personal offense to. The first sign came almost immediately. While unloading the wreck, the car reportedly slipped off its trailer and shattered both legs of the mechanic standing nearby, crushed by the very frame that had already killed once. Bad luck happens in garages, I'll grant you that. It just usually doesn't have a paint job that says "Little Bastard" on the back while it's happening. Paris, undeterred, sold off the salvageable engine and drivetrain to two separate doctors, both racing enthusiasts, who installed the parts into their own cars. What happened next depends entirely on who's telling it, and every version is worse than the last. One doctor was killed when his car, fitted with Dean's engine, spun out during a race and struck a tree. In the very same event, the other doctor's car, carrying the Spyder's drivetrain, suffered a mechanical failure that sent it careening off the track. Two cars, two racers, one dead engine, apparently still working. I don't love coincidences that come in matching pairs. Neither, apparently, did the racing circuit that quietly began refusing to let parts from that car anywhere near a track again. The tires were sold and reportedly blew out simultaneously on the new owner's car, both at once. No warning, no reasonable explanation, according to the mechanics who inspected them afterward. The car's shell, gutted now of nearly everything valuable, was loaned out to the California Highway Patrol for a road safety display meant to warn teenagers about the dangers of reckless driving. It fell off its display mount and broke a teenager's hip. At this point, you'd think the smart move is retirement, quiet storage, dust sheets, maybe a padlock. Instead, in 1959, the shell was loaded onto a truck bound for another display in Florida. The truck driver lost control on the highway. He was thrown from the vehicle and killed instantly. The wreck of the Porsche, the same wreck now trailing a body count that had nothing to do with James Dean directly, reportedly rolled off the truck bed and landed nearby, more or less untouched. By 1960, the shell had been shipped once more, packed into a sealed truck container, headed back toward its owner. When the container was opened at its destination, it was completely empty. No paperwork discrepancy, no theft report, no black market buyer ever surfaced in 50 years of people looking. The car that had, by then, been connected to at least 4 deaths and several serious injuries, had simply stopped existing between one state and another. Now, I'll give you the tidy version because it exists and it deserves airtime. Cars from the 1950s were mechanically unforgiving, poorly regulated, and driven by people with more confidence than sense, The racing deaths, in particular, happened on tracks that killed drivers with grim regularity, whether or not James Dean had ever touched the parts involved. Salvage yards lost inventory constantly, and vanished often just meant quietly scrapped by someone who didn't want the paperwork. It's a perfectly reasonable set of explanations. It's just that perfectly reasonable has never once made me feel better standing in an empty garage at night. And I don't imagine it did much for George Barris either. The man spent the rest of his life telling this story at car shows, and by most accounts, never quite laughed it off the way you'd expect a salesman to. So the last confirmed sighting of James Dean's Porsche 550 Spyder is a sealed, undamaged shipping container opened by confused workers somewhere in America in 1960 with nothing inside it at all. People have spent 6 decades looking. Barn hunters, insurance investigators, obsessive collectors with more money than patience. Nothing. Which leaves us with a machine that, as far as the paperwork is concerned, still hasn't finished its trip. Wherever it ended up, I'd very much like it to stay there.